Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. On today's show, I tell you my entire predictions of the 24-25 NBA season. That's all coming up and more on today's episode of the Take Your Shot podcast. Welcome to another episode of the podcast, and it is that time of year. The NBA regular season has officially begun, starting tonight as I am recording this on a Tuesday with the Boston Celtics and the New York Knicks. This will come out on a Friday, so every team will have played at least one game, but I am doing these predictions before any team plays any game. And I am very excited to do this once again for the second year in a row. Last year, it was a little bit bad as I picked the Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns to make the NBA Finals, and did not go as planned as expected because that was a bold prediction from both sides. I really thought that the Giannis and Dame experiment would work year one, and I thought the trio with the Phoenix Suns would work, and obviously that didn't happen, but it's a new year. It's a new season for prediction. So without further ado, the rundown for today is the in-season tournament, the Eastern Conference and Western Conference standings, the awards, and the postseason predictions, and we will do it in that order, which means we will start with the in-season tournament. And the in-season tournament, most people thought it was going to be something that really had no purpose in the NBA. I think most people thought the in-season tournament, like, what's the point of getting that $500,000 reward? It doesn't really mean anything in the big picture of the NBA. Didn't really have an effect on standings, didn't really have an effect on postseason position. So why would anybody try more in those games than a normal regular season game? But it actually was very effective. You could tell that the intensity was up for those in-season tournament games. The courts, I think, really helped. The spotlight in those games, the importance of winning every single one of those games to have a potential shot at going to Vegas, at winning the $500K, not only for yourself, but for your teammates, especially the younger ones who don't make that much money. So I thought the in-season tournament was going to be bad, just like most people, but it actually was a success, and I'm excited to see year two of this in-season tournament. And I've already discussed some of the in-season tournament. We've had some polls on it already. We've had some prior discussions on the groups already, but I'm going to give you now my official prediction of who is going to win each group, who is going to be the wild card in each conference, and who is going to win the 2024 Emirates NBA Cup. So let's review the groups and let me analyze and give you my predictions on each and every single one. So let's start with the Western Conference, as we started with the Eastern Conference last year. The Western Conference Group A consists of the Minnesota Timberwolves as the number one team, the Clippers as the number two, the Kings as the number three, the Rockets as the four, and the Blazers as the five. Remember, these teams are ranked based on the regular season standings of last season. So a 1 through 3 seed will be a number one, 4 through 6 will be a number two, and etc. So in this West Group A, you really have two teams who are most likely going to get out of it, because no offense to the Blazers, the Clippers, or the Rockets, but the Blazers and the Clippers just are probably not going to be good this year. The Rockets, based on that fourth position that they have, they're not going to have a favorable schedule, having to play both the Timberwolves and the Kings on the road. So the Rockets are probably out. So the two teams that can probably win this group are the Timberwolves and the Kings. And what's going to decide it for me is probably the home court advantage in this one. The Kings would end up hosting the Timberwolves in the in-season tournament, and that is why I'm kind of leaning towards Sacramento. Remember, this is not really a tournament where the best team necessarily wins the group every time. These are regular season games. These are not all-out games for these teams, so anything can happen. Remember, we saw the Pacers make the in-season tournament finals. Of course, they made the conference finals in the postseason, but they did have an easier playoff path. But nobody expected Indiana to win their group. I don't think a lot of people expected the Lakers to make the in-season tournament finals and win the in-season tournament, the first inaugural in-season tournament. Nobody thought that either. So anything can really happen in these in-season tournament groups. And I like Sacramento in this position. They beat Minnesota last year, and I think they can do it again. Of course, they added DeMar DeRozan this offseason, adding some veteran presence and a 3-and-D wing, much needed. So I think on that aspect, the Kings are going to be a little bit better because he is definitely an upgrade on Harrison Barnes. The question is, can the defense catch up with the offense? That is something that the Kings are going to have to figure out under Mike Brown in his third year with the Kings, obviously the third seed in his first year as the coach. Then last year they dropped to the 9 seed, losing the second playing game to the Pelicans. So it is a little bit disappointing, and I think the Kings want to get off to a quick start early because that is very important in this Western Conference, and the home court advantage against the Timberwolves, who we don't really know who they're going to be. It sort of seals it for me for this group. So that's why I'm going to say the Sacramento Kings are going to get out of Group A in the Western Conference. West Group B, this is probably one of the most competitive, if not competitive, groups in this in-season tournament. You have as the number 1, the Thunder, the number 2, the Phoenix Suns, the number 3, the Lakers, the number 4, the Utah Jazz, and the number 5, the San Antonio Spurs. Now, there's 4 teams in this group who can win and move on to the knockout rounds. I'm sorry, San Antonio, because for how good that Victor Wembanyama is, the rest of that team is an absolute disaster. So I don't see them having a shot to win. I could see Utah winning this group, even though Utah may be a little bit worse than the San Antonio. I think Utah has had some stretches where they've been pretty solid in the regular season. So I think Utah's in this mix. I mean, they could definitely be in the mix late here. The Lakers, under new head coach JJ Redick, what are they going to be? Could they be better than the version of last year? There's a lot of pressure for them to be better than the team they were last year, and they are bringing a lot of their guys back, but they could be better because there's a lot of room to grow for a Lakers team that really was in competitive playoff series with the Denver Nuggets, was very close to getting home court advantage because the West was that tight. So there's a lot of room for improvement with the Lakers, and there's a lot of pieces that they can develop. Anthony Davis could have a much better season than he did last year. So they're definitely in the conversation. Phoenix, what is going to be the new dynamic with the new head coach, Mike Budenholzer? Obviously, they signed Tyus Jones, one of the steals of free agency, only $3 million a year, and they have the big 3 coming off a sweep. So there's a lot of pressure on them. And then the Thunder, the number 1 seed of last year, they are still young and rising. They got better getting Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. So how are they going to continue rising and growing and being a dominant threat in this Western Conference? So there's really 4 teams in my eyes who can win this group. But I do think that there are going to be some teams, especially in this in-season tournament, just like last year, who want to make statements early, who want the rest of the league to know we are back. We are a team that is a threat in this conference. And I think that team who really needs to assert themselves the most is going to be the Phoenix Suns, because the way they finished last year, the way they got destroyed by the Minnesota Timberwolves, the fact that you have Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker, and you did not win one game. Yes, I know the Timberwolves had an amazing run, made the conference finals, but you got swept with 3 20-plus point per game scores. That is unacceptable. Phoenix and those 3 superstars have a lot of pressure to succeed this season because this team is very, very superstar heavy. These 3 guys are incredible basketball players. They are phenomenal individual talents, but it hasn't worked out on the court. So when are we going to see it? And I think Mike Budenholzer is going to make sure that the Suns assert themselves early. I think the Suns can definitely get a win on the road against the Thunder. They host the Lakers, so they can win that as well. I think they have to go at Utah, and then they host the Spurs. So I think Phoenix has a comfortable schedule in this group. I think they have advantages and they have the path to win this group. And as I mentioned, they need to make a statement. So I'm going to take the Suns to win West Group B. And then West Group C, we have the Nuggets, the Mavericks, the Pelicans, the Warriors, and the Grizzlies. Another great group where you could see 5 teams winning this group. You could make the case for every single one of these teams. And The question is for me, for every single group, which team's going to assert themselves early? The Mavericks, they've asserted themselves. I don't really see the Mavericks winning this because they have a tough one. They have to go at Denver. They do host the Pelicans, but they also have to go at Golden State. The Mavericks, I don't think, are going to win this group. I think the Grizzlies have a shot because they do host the Denver Nuggets. They do host the New Orleans Pelicans. I think they also have to go at Golden State. But I think the Grizzlies do have a chance to win this group. I think they could finish in second or third place in this in-season tournament. But I think the team that's going to win is going to be the number one team in this group, which is the Denver Nuggets. Because, again, Denver had a disappointing loss last year. They lost in 7, blew one of the biggest leads in Game 7 history. And there's definitely some questions surrounding that Nuggets team. Like, who's going to step up for Denver, especially after the loss of Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? Christian Braun is expected to have a great season for Denver. Is Julian Strawther going to improve for them? Is Russell Westbrook going to be the answer off the bench for the Nuggets? I think there's a lot to prove for them and for Mike Malone and his squad to show that we are still a threat and we are still a top contender team in this Western Conference. And again, assert themselves early. They have the schedule to win this group because they host the better teams, probably, in my opinion, the top 3 teams in this group in Dallas and Golden State. They have that going with them, and I think they really need to win early and really need to show the rest of the West that they are a threat. So I'm going to take the Denver Nuggets in this scenario for West Group C. Now, my wild card, I mean, it's really tough because, again, the wild card situation is a little bit different than most. The wild card is really determined by which team who doesn't win their group wins by the most points. And to me, analyzing the rest of the groups, seeing the talent, the Western Conference group that has the least amount of talent is West Group A. And as I mentioned, I said I only saw 2 teams winning that group, which was the Kings and the Timberwolves. And I'm assuming that the Kings are beating the Timberwolves, which is why I have the Kings winning that group. But I think the Timberwolves can outscore the Rockets, Blazers, and Clippers by a large margin. So I'm going to take the Timberwolves to be my wild card in the Western Conference. Now for the Eastern Conference, we have for East Group A, we have the number 1 team, the New York Knicks, the number 2 team, the Orlando Magic, the number 3 team, the 76ers, the number 4 team, the Brooklyn Nets, and the number 5 team, the Charlotte Hornets. Okay, right off the bat, Brooklyn and Charlotte, they don't really have any chance in this group. The 3 teams that are clearly going to be heavy favorites to win this group are the Knicks, the Magic, and the 76ers. The Magic have to play at New York. That is a tough one for Orlando, so I'm probably going to knock them out. The game of this in-season tournament is probably going to be a rematch of the first round, which is New York at Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia has a lot of health questions. As I mentioned last episode, Joel Embiid going to be out for back-to-backs. Paul George sitting out for the start of the season. It's going to be a ramp up for both of them to get into full form. And for that reason, I think the New York Knicks are primed to win East Group A. They host Orlando, and trust me, I think Orlando's going to have a great season. And you'll see by my Eastern Conference regular season predictions, I think the Magic are going to be great. But going to New York's a tough one. And New York has the favorable schedule out of the 3 teams. So I'm going to say the Knicks because of that. Yes, there's obviously going to be upsets. Of course, I'm not going to be right on every single prediction, but basing it off the schedule, basing it off the health of the 76ers, I think the Knicks are in the best position to win East Group A and make it back to the knockout rounds for the second year in a row, this time winning the group, as last year they were the wild card. Now for East Group B, we have the Bucks, the Pacers, the Heat, the Raptors, and the Pistons. Again, the Raptors and the Pistons not really standing a chance to win this group, so those 2 teams I'm probably going to knock out right off the jump. Then you have the Bucks, Pacers, and Heat. Out of the 3 teams, who do I think has the most favorable schedule? I would probably say the Miami Heat because they get Milwaukee at home and then Indiana on the road. Indiana has to go to Milwaukee, which is never going to be easy. And Milwaukee has to go to Miami, which, of course, in past years has not been an easy task for them. So Miami definitely has the schedule to win this group, but Milwaukee, I think, is going to have a great season. I think year two, with Doc Rivers getting a full training camp, a full opportunity to really connect with this team, get his coaching staff in there, build his offensive defensive systems. I think that's going to be better for the Bucks, having more continuity overall between the staff and the players. But I am going to take the Miami Heat in this group, and I'm going to do it because they are going to be one of those teams that are going to need to prove a lot in the regular season. We have questions about Jimmy Butler actually playing in the regular season. Miami, for the past 2 years, has been a playing team. Can they get to that playoff threshold? Because we know how good Miami can be in the postseason, especially with playoff Jimmy. This team has Terry Rozier now at the point guard. This team has some scoring. Can they really, just like the Magic, just like some other teams, get their offense to where their defense is? Can Miami get some baskets in the hoop? Can they have a higher 3-point percentage this season? That is going to be a key for the Heat this season for success. And I think that Terry Rozier is going to help with that. I think Tyler Hero is going to have one of the better seasons of his career. Bam Adebayo is going to start to shoot threes. I think Miami is going to have a decent season, maybe better than people think. So I'm going to take the Miami Heat to win East Group B. East Group C, we have probably the easiest group in the entire in-season tournament. At number one, the Celtics. Number two, the Cavaliers. Three, Hawks. Four, Bulls. And five, Wizards. The only two teams that can win this group are the Celtics and the Cavaliers. The Celtics host the Cavaliers, and let's be honest, the Celtics are the best team in the NBA. The Celtics have 4 to 5 all-star caliber players. The Celtics are the defending NBA champions. The Celtics have beaten teams by 30 plus points daily in the regular season. This is the Celtics group to lose, and I would be shocked if they lose this. And you can make the argument that this group for the Celtics is easier for them than the actual path to the NBA Finals in the last postseason, because that was easy, but this is absurd. The Hawks, a declining team, losing DeJounte Murray, sort of getting into that rebuild mode. Chicago obviously lost DeMar DeRozan, and Washington is just the Washington Wizards. They are an absolute disaster every year. So the Celtics should win that group. Now, the wild card. I'm going to use the same logic that I used for the Western Conference. What is the easiest group, and who is the second best team in that group? As I just said, the easiest group and probably the whole in-season tournament is East Group C. Who is the team that is the second best team in that group? That is the Cavaliers. And should the Cavaliers outscore the Hawks, Bulls, and Washington Wizards by a lot? Probably. So I'm going to take the Cleveland Cavaliers as my wild card team. Now for the in-season tournament knockout rounds. We have, of course, the 3 group winners in the West, which I will review again. The Kings, the Suns, the Nuggets, and the Timberwolves are my wild card. The Wolves will play at Phoenix, and the Nuggets will play at Sacramento. I think the Phoenix Suns will defeat the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I think the Sacramento Kings will fall once again at home in the in-season tournament knockout rounds. But this time, instead of the Pelicans, they will lose to the Denver Nuggets. So I have the Phoenix Suns and the Denver Nuggets going to Las Vegas for the semifinals. In the Eastern Conference, I have the Celtics hosting the wildcard Cavs, and then I have the Knicks hosting the number 3 Miami Heat. And I think the Celtics are going to beat the Cleveland Cavaliers because the Celtics are the best team and they should not lose that game. And I think they were a little bit disappointed last year that they lost to Indy in the knockout round. And then the New York Knicks are going to beat the Miami Heat because I think the Knicks are going to be too much in the Garden in a game that's going to be very loud, very intense, and a game that the Knicks probably want because they want to make it far in an in-season tournament where they can show that we can beat the top of the top. We can get to Vegas. We can make the in-season tournament final. We can be at the level where the rest of the contenders in the league are. So I think that game is going to be important for the Knicks more than the Miami Heat. So I think the Knicks would win that one. Now in Las Vegas, the semifinals. In the West, I have the Nuggets and the Suns. And I have in the East, I have the Knicks and the Celtics. I have the Suns defeating the Denver Nuggets because I think the Suns really need to assert themselves, and I think the Suns have a chance to make a run here in the in-season tournament. Of course, they have the offense, and I think Tyus Jones is going to make a difference for the Suns. So I'm going to take the Suns there. The Knicks and the Celtics. Now, this is one that's a potential Eastern Conference Finals preview, but there's going to be a team that's going to need it more. And that team, as I mentioned in the previous game that they had against the Miami Heat, that I predict is going to happen, I think the Knicks are going to need this game more than the Celtics. I think the Knicks need to show the world why they can compete with the Celtics and why the Eastern Conference is not Boston or bust. I think the Knicks are going to prove a lot of people wrong about their team, and I think they're going to show that they have an actual shot to make the NBA Finals. So I'm going to take the Knicks in an upset over the Boston Celtics. And my championship game in the in-season tournament, I have the New York Knicks against the Phoenix Suns. And my winner of the 2024 Emirates NBA Cup is going to be the Phoenix Suns. It is going to be a close scoring game. It's going to come down to the wire, but at the end of the day, in today's NBA, the offense is going to win, and Kevin Durant is going to have an amazing performance in the in-season tournament, winning the MVP of the Emirates NBA Cup, and the Phoenix Suns will be the second winner of the in-season tournament. So I have the Suns over the Knicks in the in-season tournament. Now let's get to the Eastern Conference standings as we predict 15 through 1 going from worst to best in the conference. And last year, this was really, really bad. So we're going to see if we can do a little bit better this year. And we will start with the East since I started with the West and the in-season tournament. And the Eastern Conference, I mean, most people really think that the 8 playoff teams are set. And I would agree with them on that. There's really the 8 teams, and then there's the bottom 7. And there's not really anything that can change that unless the bottom 7 make a major change. I would be pretty surprised if any of the bottom 7 teams that I list are going to make the postseason. And we will start with the number 15 seed, the worst team in the Eastern Conference, and quite frankly, I think going to be the worst team in the NBA, the Washington Wizards. The Washington Wizards are coming off a awful season, winning only 15 games last year, if I'm not mistaken. They really didn't do anything. Their big move was getting Jonas Valanciunas in free agency, but they're most likely going to trade him at the deadline. They drafted Alex Sarr with the second overall pick, but again, Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma are some of those guys that are really hot or they're not. And most of the time, they're not. And their defense is an absolute disaster, and you've got to hope that their defense can somewhat contain the other team. While Poole and Kuzma both have great games at the same time, and that just doesn't happen a lot. So I think Washington's going to struggle once again. I'm interested to see how Carlton Carrington is going to do their lottery pick, the 14th pick from Pitt. And yeah, not a lot to say about the Wizards because they are a disaster. The number 14 team I have in the Eastern Conference is the Brooklyn Nets. The Brooklyn Nets obviously making the big move to trade Mikal Bridges to get 5 first-round picks, finally getting into that rebuild mode, and then making another trade with the Houston Rockets, sending some of Phoenix picks there to get their own picks. So now the Nets control their own destiny, which is absolutely fantastic for them. I think they had a great offseason getting their picks back while getting a lot of the New York Knicks first-round picks. So I think Brooklyn's set for the future. Obviously, this is going to be a rebuilding season. They don't really have any superstar caliber player on this roster. I'm expecting Cam Thomas to make a jump and look for him to be in the race for the most improved player because we've seen what he has done on the offensive side of the ball when he has been given the minutes. So expect him to have a big season. And other than that, I mean, this team's just not really good. I mean, you have Schroeder at the point, you have Johnson and Finney-Smith, but those guys are probably going to get done at the deadline. Nick Claxton decided to re-sign. Maybe he'll take a jump up. The bench isn't really that good either. You have a lot of unproven young guys, Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney, Day'Ron Sharp. Those guys are okay, not really proven. And it's going to be a long season for Brooklyn, but I think it's going to be a little bit better than the Washington Wizards. So I have Brooklyn as the 14th seed. The number 13 seed in the Eastern Conference. This may surprise some people. This definitely may shock some people, but I'm going to take the Chicago Bulls as the 13th seed, and I don't think they're going to have a great season at all. I think that DeMar DeRozan loss hurts, and I think Chicago is finally going to do something that they should have done a long time ago. Actually rebuild and trade some of their guys at the trade deadline. Look for Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic to be on the move at the deadline. I think Josh Giddey is going to have a great season for Chicago. Kobe White, obviously coming off a great season last year and probably looking to build on that. I like the pick of Matas Buzelis. I think he's going to be a great guy for them in the future, but obviously he is in his rookie season. But other than that, this team's not really deep. You have Lonzo Ball coming back from injuries. Ayo Dosunmu had a disappointing season last year after a great second year in the NBA. Yeah, this team's just not really that deep with a lot of unproven or injury prone guys. So I think Chicago's going to have a long year and they're going to decide to make some moves at the deadline, which is why I have them at 13. At number 12, I have the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets, the only problem with the Charlotte Hornets throughout these years has been the health of their best player, which has been LaMelo Ball. Can LaMelo Ball stay on the floor? If he does stay on the floor, I think they could be a playing team and they could make some noise in that tournament. If not, they're going to be a bottom two team in the East. And I think it's going to be in the middle of that. I think LaMelo is going to be healthy for some of the season, and I think he's going to be injured for some of the season because that's just how LaMelo Ball is. He always gets injured. But someone that I'm looking out for this Hornets team this year is Trey Mann. Trey Mann is going into his fourth year out of Florida. He showed some great flashes last year with Charlotte after being traded from Oklahoma City in the deal that sent Hayward to the Thunder. I think he has been a great asset for them. Hopefully, Brandon Miller has a sophomore jump instead of a sophomore slump. And we'll see how the development of Mark Williams continues as he will have a hopefully fully healthy season in his third year after an injury-prone second year. And their bench isn't really that great. But I think LaMelo Ball will be healthy enough to where they will be somewhat relevant in the Eastern Conference and better than some of those bottom teams that I had there. The number 11 seed, the Detroit Pistons. They were the worst team in basketball last year, and I'm going to have them improving significantly to the point where they are almost in the play-in tournament. And I will tell you why. This team got better. It may sound crazy, but the Pistons actually got better. They signed Tobias Harris and they signed Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley. Oh, you may say those guys aren't that good, but for a young team, they need veteran presence. They need guys who can come in, score on a consistent basis. We saw Tobias Harris when he gets the ball. He is a shot maker. Tobias Harris isn't as bad as people think. I think he just had a lot of pressure at Philly. He's going back to a smaller market, a team where he can really thrive on next to Cade Cunningham. Tim Hardaway Jr. averaged 18 points per game in the regular season with the Mavericks. I mean, why can't he do that with Detroit, especially a team that's worse? And then Malik Beasley is also going to be huge for them as well. He was a starter for the Bucks last year. He is going to help the Pistons as well. And again, this is a young team. You have the development of Cade Cunningham, another year under his belt. Jaden Ivey with his third year. Sar Thompson entering his sophomore year. You have the young centers in Duran and Isaiah Stewart. Simone Fontecchio is now coming off the bench. He had a great finish to the season for the Pistons last year after being traded from the Jazz at the deadline. This team is young, and they are only going to get better. And the help of the veterans with the scoring load in the regular season is definitely going to help. And I think this is going to be a much improved team. And I think Bickerstaff shouldn't have gotten fired from Cleveland. And I think he's a great head coach who is going to help the development of this basketball team. So I think they're going to be good. And don't be surprised if the Pistons are in the play-in mix. My first team in the play-in, the team just barely making the play-in as the number 10 seed, I have the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks obviously made a big move this offseason, getting rid of DeJounte Murray and ending that Trae Young and Murray experiment. Of course, they lucked out in the lottery, getting the number 1 pick and drafting Zachary Riza-Shea. Riza-Shea has been solid so far in the preseason. Nothing too exciting, but nothing really that bad either. So we'll see how he does. He's probably going to come off the bench. They don't really have that much star power other than Trae Young. Their starting lineup is okay. Expect for Jalen Johnson to have a great season. Definitely going to be in the mix for the Most Improved Player award. I hope he potentially gets to that level where DeJounte Murray was, becomes that second option for the Atlanta Hawks, and I think he definitely has the potential to do that. I mean, Clint Capella has been pretty average. He's been out a little bit. I've always thought the Hawks should have started at Congo for years. They really haven't done that. And I mean, this team is basically the average team. Atlanta is basically the definition of average. There was one point last season where through 1,000 games, they were literally 500 and 500. This Hawks team is going to be average and probably a little bit worse than that with the loss of DeJounte Murray. They'll get in the play-in. They'll be competitive because of Trae Young's offensive ability and that team's overall offensive ability, but that team's defense is just a disaster. So they are going to be my 10 seed. They're going to finish in the same spot they did last year. The number 9 seed, I have the Toronto Raptors, and they had a terrible finish to last season, only winning 25 games, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know the exact number. But I really find this team intriguing because I think Emmanuel Quickly, a guy who I thought did great off the bench for the New York Knicks, now gets that opportunity to be a full-time starting point guard, and I think he's going to thrive. I think RJ Barrett's going to have more of an opportunity on this team. Scotty Barnes is only going to get better. Grady Dick in his second year is going to get better. I like their bench. I think Kelly Olynyk's a solid guy off their bench. Ochai Agbaji is pretty good. Bruce Brown, of course, we know what he did with Denver now, coming off the bench for this Raptors team. Davion Mitchell, Jacoby Walter, 2 young guards from Baylor who have potential to break out, and they're both great defenders. This Raptors team isn't as bad as people think, and I think year 2 under Darko Milicic with the not Darko Milicic, sorry, Darko Rajovic. I'm sorry, I'm confusing Darko, the pick after LeBron James in 03. Darko Rajovic is going to have a much improved season with this team. I think, as I said, Quickly is going to be a lot better. He's going to be the key for this team this season, and expect Scotty Barnes to have an all-star caliber season. I think the Raptors are going to surprise some people, and they're going to get pretty close to that 8th seed. And that 8th seed that I do have is going to be the Miami Heat. For, what is this, the 3rd year in a row now? The Miami Heat are they're just average. I mean, they're not great. They just don't have enough, and this team is only getting older. Butler's now 35, and they don't really have a lot of star power. They did get Terry Rozier, which he will probably help offensively, but again, this team's never healthy in the regular season. Butler takes days off in the regular season, doesn't really try in the regular season games. Of course, they're always going to be a threat when they are out there because of what they have done in the past postseasons, but this team really missed their window of opportunity from 2020 to 2023, and now they are in a situation where if they don't do great to start the season, could they trade Jimmy Butler? Could they look to get younger, build around Bam Adebayo? That is going to be one of the key stories that we are going to be following early in this season, and that is definitely one to look out for. Their big acquisition this offseason was Alec Burks. They drafted Khalil Ware, who was great in the Summer League, as the Miami Heat won the Summer League title. But there's just not really a lot to look forward to because they keep bringing back the same team, and this same team is an 8th seed. And that's why I'm going to pick them as the 8th seed again, because I think they're better than the bottom 7 teams, but they're not better than the top 7 teams. They're just in their own tier of being stuck in the middle, which is never a good thing in the NBA. The number 7 seed, I have the Indiana Pacers, a team that did make the conference finals last year. And that was a tough decision to make because I think the top 7 teams in the East are very, very good basketball teams. And Indiana, they're essentially running it back this year. They pretty much are bringing the same starting 5 back. Halliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, and Miles Turner all coming back. They have pretty much the same bench, except Benedict Mathurin will be healthy now. But I think people are going to figure out the Indiana Pacers. I think their offense is just something that they have to rely on every game. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think they got a little bit lucky with the health of the Eastern Conference last year. Most of the East was not healthy for most of the regular season and most of the postseason. So I expect Indiana to take a little bit of a drop off. They are known on the map now. They are a much more well-known team. They're not going to surprise a lot of teams this season because They did make the conference finals. They did beat two quality teams in the Milwaukee Bucks and the New York Knicks. So I think they are going to take a slight step back from where they were last season. The number 6 seed I have is the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I think that the 76ers are better than the New York Knicks. But this is the regular season standings. This isn't the postseason results. The 76ers are not going to be good in the regular season because Joel Embiid is going to be out a lot. Paul George is going to be out a lot. It's that simple. It is that plain and simple. Those two are their best players, and they're not going to be playing most of the regular season games. So are we going to rely on Tyrese Maxey again? Because if they rely on Tyrese Maxey, they're going to be a 500 team. I love Tyrese Maxey, great player, but they just don't have enough around playing just Tyrese Maxey and making him take 30 shots a game. The team's great. I think this is the best roster that they've had, but they're still a 500 team without Joel Embiid and Paul George. And of course, they're going to win a lot more games when they're on the court, which is why I have them as a 6 seed, getting around 48 wins. But they're not going to do anything better than that if those two are not going to be on the court. I mean, I love the pickup of Caleb Martin. I love the pickup of Andre Drummond. I love the pickup of Yugoslave. I thought retaining guys like Kyle Lowry and Kelly Oubre Jr. were great. And I think their draft pick in Jared McCain was great. But at the end of the day, if the superstars are not going to be healthy, they're not going to be good in the regular season, which is why I have them as the number 6 seed. The number 5 seed, I have the Cleveland Cavaliers under first-year head coach Kenny Atkinson. I think the Cavaliers are a great regular season team. They're bringing back the same team. I know Max Strus is going to be out for the first 6 weeks of the regular season, so they'll probably start Dean Wade. This team pretty much the same. They didn't really get any better. They didn't really get any worse, so they're probably going to have around the same success. I'm interested to see how some of their young guys develop and potentially get in the rotation, like Jalen Tyson was great for them. Craig Porter Jr. was great for the Cavaliers last year, so let's see if those two guys can make some jumps for them. But other than that, it's really the same team, and they're going to finish around that 4 to 5 slot every single year if they keep bringing back this roster. So I have the Cavs as the number 5 seed. The number 4 seed, I have the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to look a little bit better this year, but somehow they're going to finish as a lower seed. It makes absolutely no sense, but that is the NBA. I thought one of the more underrated pickups this offseason was Gary Trent Jr. As I mentioned, this is year 2 of Doc Rivers. Well, technically year 1.5. He gets a full season of training camp. He gets to bring in his staff. He gets to develop that continuity with the players. It's going to be much better and much smoother for a Bucks team that had a very unique situation, firing a coach in the middle of the year and not even hiring internally for the interim head coach position, just hiring Doc Rivers while he was on the booth at ESPN. Now, Chris Middleton's going to be out for the start of the regular season. That shouldn't be too much of a concern. The question is the depth. Is DeLon Wright and Taurean Prince going to be the answers off the bench? We know how good Bobby Portis is, but who are going to be the guys to come off the bench for the Bucks? It's going to be probably those two. It's going to have to be AJ Green potentially having to develop into a much better player and becoming a reliable shooter off the bench. It's going to be Pat Connaughton. Those 9 guys, the starting 5 in Lillard, Trent Jr., Middleton, Giannis, Brook Lopez, then DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, Bobby Portis, and AJ Green. Those are going to be the guys. Those are going to be the 9 guys that are going to be in this rotation. It's going to be a lot of depth proving. Is that bench going to be enough for the Bucks? And some games it will be, and some games it won't. So I don't think they're going to necessarily be that great, like a 55-plus win team, but they're going to win games because they have Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, which is why I have them as the number 4 seed. The number 3 seed, potentially the surprise team of the year, the Orlando Magic. You got to play that song. That song, Orlando Magic song, is intriguing, and it just gets stuck in your head. And it's going to get stuck in a lot of people's heads this year because it's going to play a lot of times. I think the Orlando Magic are going to have a breakout season. I think Paolo Banchero is going to have another breakout year. I think he is going to get on another level. Look out for Banchero to be an all-star starter. I said it, an all-star starter in the Eastern Conference. I think he is going to be that good. Franz Wagner is going to be an all-star. The development of the guards, Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, are going to be great. One of the more underrated pickups, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, a shooter who can help the Magic in something that they've struggled in, which is shooting the ball, and he's a great defender as well. This Magic team is arguably the best team at defense in the league. They're going to shock some people. They have great depth, and they have a great underrated head coach in Jamal Mosley. And I think there's going to be a surprise team in every single conference. In each conference. That's how the NBA works. There's going to be a team where we think, oh, they're going to finish 6th, 7th, up, they're going to get the 3 seed. And I think that team's going to be the Magic because I think Paolo Banchero is going to have an amazing season. Now, the number 2 seed, I'm going to take the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks obviously made some big moves this offseason in acquiring Mikal Bridges and Karl Anthony Towns. The question is, will that lead to postseason success? That is an answer that we don't know to. But I do think it's going to lead to regular season success. I do like their bench. I expect Miles McBride to have another great season. I think Achua is very underrated, and when Mitchell Robinson becomes healthy, he is going to be fine. I think the depth is a little bit questionable early, so they may struggle a little bit early on that aspect, but their starting 5 is just really, really good. Just a very solid up in front, scoring, defense. It's just probably behind Boston, the most solid starting 5 in the league, the most consistent, the most all-around starting 5 in the NBA in Brunson, Bridges, Hart, Anunoby, and Karl Anthony Towns. They're going to be good once again, and I think they are going to get the 2 seed for the second year in a row. And, of course, the number 1 seed, we have the Boston Celtics running it back once again in the Eastern Conference. The Celtics are not going to have Kristaps Porzingis until December, but it doesn't matter. Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, 4 all-star caliber players. Their ability to shoot the ball from downtown, hitting a lot of threes is just at an unbelievable rate. Joe Mazzulla has really proven himself as a head coach. This team is the best team on paper in the league, and I'm excited to see not only that team run it back, but to see the development of guys like Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser, the future of that team, and maybe someone else comes and shocks us in the Celtics rotation. Maybe Xavier Tillman or Luke Kornet come out and be a consistent role player for that team. Maybe it's a guy like Jalen Springer. Maybe it's Jordan Walsh. Maybe it's the rookie and Baylor Shireman. Maybe someone else. That's something I'm going to be looking towards for the Celtics this year. But again, this team's amazing. They'll be fine. They are going to get the 1 seed, and it's probably not going to be close just like last season. So that is my Eastern Conference predictions in the regular season. Let's move on to the Western Conference. And the Western Conference, of course, is very, very competitive. This is probably the most talent we've ever seen in a conference in the history of basketball. Now, you can interpret that all you want. But in my opinion, you could make the case for 13 teams to get into the postseason. 13 teams. You could tell me why they should be in the playoffs, and I would say, okay, it's valid. It's definitely valid. And there's 2 teams that are probably separated from the other 13. And we will start with those 2 teams at the bottom of the Western Conference. And the worst team in the Western Conference, I think, is going to be the Portland Trail Blazers. They have been an absolute disaster since trading Damian Lillard. They're not healthy. They don't have a great roster. And they're just not very good. They just don't have a great team. They look like they have a good team on paper, but it just doesn't really execute on the court. Anthony Simon, Shady, and Sharp, never healthy. Scoot Henderson, he wasn't healthy last year. Can he do good in his second season? Hopefully, if he stays healthy. Denny Avdia was an underrated pickup, but they gave 2 first-round picks for him. Jeremy Grant and DeAndre Ayton, I mean, they look like they want to walk out of the door in Portland, and I don't really blame them because of the disaster on how that team's ran. Chris Murray, pretty solid off the bench. Of course, Keegan Murray's brother, can he take a leap this year in his second season? He's a great shooter, of course, just like his brother. And, of course, the rookie Donovan Clingan. Let's see how he does. I think Portland could potentially make some moves at the deadline, trading DeAndre Ayton and Jeremy Grant, making room for guys like Donovan Clingan and Chris Murray to eventually start on the Blazers. I think that would be the smart thing for them to do, acquire more assets and continue the rebuilding process. But Portland can do what Portland does. I mean, Joe Cronin, he thought he had a plan by trading Dame to Portland and basically getting not a lot back for him, not a lot of valuable assets at least back for him. So Portland's just really in a bad situation, and they are clearly the worst team in this conference. The number 14 seed and the second to worst team in this Western Conference, and the team that probably is not going to make the playoffs either, just like the Blazers, is going to be the Utah Jazz. Again, they're a rebuilding team. It just hasn't really gone anywhere. I thought they were going to trade Markkanen in this offseason. They didn't. Of course, look for him to be potentially available at the trade deadline, but this team's just not really that good. I did like their draft. I 100% thought their draft was great. And the fact that they got all of Isaiah Collier, Cody Williams, and Kyle Filipowski, I thought was an absolutely amazing draft. Now, obviously, it's their first year. They're not going to be that great. They're not going to make that much of an impact on the team in year one. But for the future, I think those three guys are going to be important assets for the Jazz. I think their starting lineup's solid, but not incredible, obviously. They're not that great, but I think it's a solid starting lineup. Keontae George had a great rookie season. Expect him to be good in his second year. Sexton was pretty solid. Markkanen, of course, can play at an all-star level. Taylor Hendricks and Walker Kessler, of course, are the two weak points at the starting lineup, but they are two decent players as well. And off the bench, you have Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, Patty Mills that they signed, and they'll probably end up playing Cody Williams, their lottery pick. I mean, it's a decent team. It's a really decent team. And 5 years ago, I would have called this team a playing team, but the West is just so good to the point where Utah's not even in the consideration to be a playing team, which is why I have them as the 14 seed due to the rest of the league. And the number 13 seed, I have the San Antonio Spurs. Surprising to some, yeah, but I'll tell you why. What's the big deal about Chris Paul? I get he has made an impact on every single team he's played on, but he had an awful season with Golden State last year, the worst of his career. He's not going to be a game changer at starting point guard. Chris Paul had his time. He is very old now. He is not good. He is not the player he used to be. He is not going to make that big of an impact for the Spurs. Maybe his veteran presence, maybe developing the pick and roll game, but that's it. Yes, we know Victor Wembanyama is going to have a great sophomore season. He is a generational talent. We get that. But that's not going to make the needle. One player doesn't move the needle. It is a team that moves the needle. And I think Harrison Barnes was a great acquisition. I do. But the rest of this roster is just not really good. Jeremy Shohan, Devin Vassell, not really that great. Trey Jones, decent backup point guard, but not really moving the needle there. They'll probably play Stephon Castle, but I mean, they just don't have a good roster around Victor Wembanyama. I understand why people may say that the Spurs could be a play-in team, but they just don't have the roster. Wemby's great, but you need a team to win, not an individual player. That is how this NBA works, and especially in a Western Conference that is this stacked. The number 12 seed, I'm going to take the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers, of course, lost Paul George this offseason, and, of course, to start the season for the millionth time, Kawhi Leonard is going to be injured, and at this point, Kawhi Leonard, I don't know what to do with him. I don't know what the league is going to do with him. I don't know what the Clippers are going to do with him. He is just out apparently every single game of every single season. So this is James Harden's team, an old James Harden's team. I mean, this would have been great if it was 2018 James Harden, but this is 24-25 James Harden. This is not going to be nearly the team it once was. And they don't really have that much depth. I mean, their bench isn't really that great. I mean, they have Kevin Porter Jr., Chris Dunn, Amir Coffey, Batum, and Mo Bamba. That's not really that great. I mean, their starting lineup's not that great either. They don't have a lot of star power. Norman Powell, who did come off the bench, now is being forced to start because their team's just not that good. Terrence Mann, I mean, Derrick Jones Jr. and Zubac, they're not really that great either. I mean, this is James Harden's team until Kawhi Leonard gets healthy, and this team's just not really that great. I don't think they're going to make the plan. I think there's going to be a lot of questions asked about the Los Angeles Clippers this offseason and after this season, and we will see what happens with Harden and Kawhi after this season, and I think it's not going to be a great one for the Clippers. So I have them at the 12 seed in the stacked Western Conference. The number 11 seed, I'm going to take the Houston Rockets. And people really think that the Rockets are going to be a play-in team this year, and that's understandable. I completely get where you're coming from, 100%. But at the end of the day, how much is Şengün going to improve? How much is Jalen Green going to improve? Fred VanVleet's ready at his prime. He's not going to improve that much. I mean, Reed Shepherd's great. Could win Rookie of the Year, but he's coming off the bench. I mean, he's not going to get that much minutes. He's not going to get that much of an opportunity to make his mark. I mean, Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore, how much are they really going to develop? I like the Houston Rockets. They are a young team, but there's just not really that much room where I can say, oh, they're going to improve this much that they're going to move up a lot. They could be 500 again and miss the plan, 100%. But it's just such a stacked conference where there's just not a lot of room for them. I hope that they make the plan. I hope for the Rockets' sake, because they have just been a disaster since the whole James Harden debacle. And I think Ime Udoka is a great coach. I really do. But this team's just not that great. This team is just not a team that you look at and say, they're a threat. They're a young, rising team, but they're not a threat. So for those reasons, I'm going to have to keep them out of the play-in tournament for the second straight season, falling behind the Golden State Warriors, who will get the last spot once again in the play-in tournament. Honestly, for how bad people thought that the Klay Thompson loss was, I think the Warriors had a great offseason. They got Buddy Hield to replace him. They got DeAnthony Melton, a solid guy who can come off the bench and provide defense. They got Kyle Anderson, who was great for Minnesota last year. And I think the Warriors are very, very deep, one of the more deeper teams in this league. I mean, there are legitimately 12 guys that are playable for Golden State. I can go down the list and tell you all of them. I mean, of course, you have Curry, Wiggins, Kuminga. What is he going to do in another year of development for him? Draymond's Draymond. Trace Jackson Davis as a second-round pick at a great rookie season. You have, as I mentioned, DeAnthony Melton, Pajemski in year 2 after an amazing first year. Buddy Hield, Kyle Anderson, Kevon Looney. Then you have Moses Moody and Gary Payton. I mean, this team has a lot of depth. And even when some guys are out, there's going to be players who can fill the roles. I mean, this roster overall compared to the rest of the West, I mean, it's not eye-opening, but you do have the greatest shooter God ever created. So they're going to make a plan, but it's going to be one of those years where, I mean, they're going to be over 500, but, I mean, they're just not better definitively than a team like the Pelicans or a team like the Nuggets or the Mavericks or the Suns. They're just not better than them. But they're going to hang in there because they have a great, great basketball player and they have depth to support him. Now, the number 9 seed, I have the Memphis Grizzlies. And the Memphis Grizzlies took essentially a gap year. Last year, they had all the injuries, John Morant suspension, then he's out for the season. Jaren Jackson was really the only one healthy, and now he's starting the season off injured. But now they get a look at this new version of the Grizzlies. Of course, they acquired Marcus Smart last year and the whole Kristaps Porzingis 3-team deal. John Morant's coming back healthy. Jaren Jackson is healthy. When he comes back, will be good to go. Desmond Bane is coming back healthy. They drafted, of course, the 7'3" Demon, out of Purdue and Zach Edey. They have some guys off the bench who had great seasons last year when the Grizzlies were obviously taking that gap year in Vince Williams Jr., Scottie Pippen Jr., Santi Aldama, Gigi Jackson. So those guys are going to get opportunities to prove themselves on a great basketball team. And of course, you have Luke Kennard, Brandon Clark, along with others supporting the depth. So Memphis is going to be back. They're going to be a team that you have to look out for. They're not going to be a team you're going to take lightly because John Morant is a stud and he is an incredible basketball player who can change the trajectory of a franchise. Now, the problem is this roster isn't really as good as it was a couple years ago. And a 2-seed Memphis Grizzlies in 2022 is probably a 6 seed in this year in this year's NBA, but they got a little bit worse than they were in 2022 and 2021 when they were the 2 seeds. They're not as good as they were, which is why I think that they they are not going to really be in that playoff position. I think they're going to be a play-in team. And I do think health is going to be a little bit of a problem once again because we really can't trust this team health-wise because they don't really stay healthy. But I think they have a great roster. John Morant's a superstar, but they're not healthy, and they just don't have as good of a roster as they had a couple years ago. And that's why I'm going to have them as a play-in team. The number 8 seed that I have is the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are going to start the season under new head coach JJ Redick. I'm a believer in JJ Redick. I really am. I think JJ Redick is going to do wonders for this team. The only problem is it's the same team, and the West has only gotten better. I mean, LeBron's only getting older. AD is only getting older. I mean, how much better can Austin Reeves really get? I mean, there's not really any guy who you could say on the Lakers is going to have a breakout year. Maybe Max Christie, but other than that, not really anybody. I did like their draft. Well, their one pick, Dalton Knecht, in the first round. I thought he was a steal, but there's not really a lot. There's not really that much room for improvement for the Lakers. There's really not. There's just nowhere where you can say that the Lakers are going to be that much better. I think Redick's going to keep them in it for a while. And I think they're going to do maybe a little bit better in the postseason than they did this year. But it's just really the same team. And how much can coaching really do for a team when you're just bringing back the same exact roster? So I think the Lakers are going to finish exactly where they did last year, the number 8 seed. Another play-in year for the Los Angeles Lakers after winning their title in 2020, their third out of 4 years. The number 7 seed, the last team in the play-in tournament, I have the Sacramento Kings. Sacramento Kings were a play-in team last year. They're going to be a play-in team this year, but they're going to be in a better position because of DeMar DeRozan. Because, of course, DeMar DeRozan is going to make an impact on your basketball team. But they're bringing back everybody else. I mean, their bench is not that great. It's Malik Monk, and then it's everybody, and then it's the starting 5, and then there's just not a lot else. But that starting 5 is great. Fox, Herter, DeRozan, Keegan Murray, and Sabonis, a top 5 Western Conference starting 5. The bench is just awful, and if someone gets injured, this team's not going to be in a great position. How much can you trust Keon Ellis, Trey Lyles, and Alex Len to really hold up the fort for the Kings? You really can't, which is why I can't put them in the playoffs, even though I think that big 3 of Sabonis, DeRozan, and Fox is going to be great. So I believe that they're going to be a play-in team as the number 7 seed. The number 6 seed, just getting into the playoffs, I have the New Orleans Pelicans. They were a play-in team last year, but DeJounte Murray is going to make the difference in pushing them towards the playoffs. That starting 5 is the most complete starting 5 that they've had in a while. I mean, DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Herb Jones. That is a complete offense to defense starting 5. It's a really, really good starting 5. And 4 out of those 5 guys, excluding Herbert Jones, can give you 30 on any night. DeJounte Murray is a bucket getter. McCollum is a bucket getter. Ingram, he had a disappointing finish to last year, but we know what he can do. He is an all-star caliber player. And, of course, Zion, their best player, is Zion. The question is, can they stay healthy? Can Zion Williamson be healthy for another full year? Can he be consistently healthy in back-to-back seasons? He was great last year. Of course, he had that injury at the end of the season, which was unfortunate, but he did play a lot in the regular season, so you can't really be mad at him. Can he do it again, though? That's the question. This team's a lot better. So I'm going to put them out of the play-in tournament, and I'm going to put them in the playoff field because of their overall talent. They did lose Najee Marshall, but I think guys like Trey Murphy, Alvarado are going to continue to get better. I like their draft pick in Yves Messi. I think Daniel Tice was a great pickup as a backup center for them. So I think they're going to be a better team, which is why I'm going to push them in the playoff conversation. Now, the number 5 seed, I have the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets are going to be my 5 seed. And I'll tell you why. Their bench is just unproven. It's just an unproven bench. I mean, Julian Strawther, Hunter Tyson, Peyton Watson, they're unproven guys. Show me something. I haven't seen last year. I didn't really see them really show me something. And they're going to have to show it this year because why do you think the Nuggets won a title in 2023? They had Jeff Green. They had Bruce Brown off the bench. They had Christian Braun off the bench. That team had three consistent guys you could rely on off the bench. Maybe Russell Westbrook could make a difference for this team. But where's the other two? Which other two guys? Is it going to be Dario Saric or is it going to be two out of the three of the guys that I mentioned in Strawther, Tyson, and Watson? It's got to be. I think Denver has a chance to win a title this year. Just because I'm putting them as the 5 seed doesn't mean I don't think they could make a run in the postseason. But the bench is just unproven. And Denver usually has their fair share of injuries in the regular season, which is why I'm going to put them as the number 5 seed. The number 4 seed I have is going to be the Phoenix Suns. I think they are going to have a much improved season. And of course, I've been saying this podcast after podcast. Tyus Jones is going to be a huge difference for that team. They needed a point guard. They got one. Someone to set up Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant instead of facilitating for themselves. And of course, they're going to bring back Grayson Allen. They signed him to an extension. Royce O'Neal is coming back. Mason Plumlee, they got who I think is going to be solid for them off the bench. And hopefully they can get a young guy like Ryan Dunn, Oso Iguodala, their undrafted rookie, to step up. But I think Phoenix has a little bit of a better bench than people think. And the point guard in Tyus Jones, someone who has the best assist-to-turnover ratio in the league today, is going to make a difference for Mike Budenholzer in his first year with the Suns. And I think he's a great hire for them as well. I think Budenholzer just broke down in that Bucks series against the Heat, which is why he got fired. And of course, if you lose as a 1 seed to an 8 seed, your job's definitely going to be in jeopardy. But he's a very good basketball coach and a great basketball mind, and he is going to improve this team. So I'm going to have this team as the number 4 seed. The number 3 seed, I'm going to have the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks, I think they got better. I think getting Klay Thompson, getting Najee Marshall, trading for Quentin Grimes, they got better. And of course, they're now going to have a full season with PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford at the helm. Derek Lively's going into his second season. I mean, Dallas is young. Other than Kyrie and Klay, it's a very young basketball team, and they are going to improve. And coming off a finals appearance, they're hungry. They want more. I would probably put them higher, but I think they're a little bit now more circled on the map in the NBA realm. So it's going to be definitely a game circled on teams' calendars. But they still have a great roster, and getting a 3 seed in this tough Western Conference is a very good accomplishment for the regular season. So I have met the Mavericks as the number 3 seed. The number 2 seed, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, of course, made a shocking move in trading Karl-Anthony Towns, getting Randall and DiVincenzo, but I do like DiVincenzo for their bench. I think Naz Reid is going to get more of an opportunity to thrive offensively without Karl-Anthony Towns there, and I think that mix of DiVincenzo and Reid off the bench, along with Joe Ingles and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think that's a perfect 9-man rotation for this team. Edwards, of course, Ant-Man is only going to get better. He could potentially be in the MVP race this season. I think Randall is going to be out for a vengeance, and I think Randall may be a little bit better than people think because of the pressure he had at New York. This is a less pressure situation in Minnesota. Yes, I know they're contenders as well, but there's a difference between playing in the Target Center compared to Madison Square Garden. There is definitely a difference, people, and there's going to be less pressure for him. So I think Minnesota is going to do great in the regular season once again and get the 2 seed. And the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder got the 1 seed last year. I expect no less. They got better, as I mentioned, getting Alex Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein. Of course, Shea's only going to get better. Jalen Williams, he's going to get better. Chet in his technically second year, but third year because he was injured in his first year, he's going to get better. This is just a young team that has a lot more room for growth. Of course, they had the second round loss to the Mavericks, and they hope to do a little bit better than that this season, and they have the potential to do so. So we will see what happens there, but they are definitely a great regular season team. And I'd be pretty shocked if they don't get the number one seed and expect Shea Gilgeous-Alexander to be in the MVP conversation. So those are my Western Conference standings. Now let's get to the awards section before we get to the postseason, as I have a decent amount of controversy in these awards because I showed these to some friends before I got on the podcast, and let's just say they're not very favorable. I don't think they're biased. I know I'm a Heat fan. There's a couple of Heat players in the not winning the award. Well, one's winning the award, one's in the top three. I don't know. Maybe I am a little bit biased. Who knows? But again, this is my list, not yours. You can treat it how you like. But I'm going to give you my top three for every award category, and we will go on from there. So let's start with the Clutch Player of the Year, probably the least relevant award here, but the most recent award that they installed in the NBA. At number three, I have Steph. Obviously, Steph, he just has the clutch veins. I mean, whenever the Warriors need a bucket, he's just going to be there and get it for them. I mean, he's the heart and soul of that team. He's usually in the conversation. I think he won the inaugural award for Clutch Player of the Year, I think in 2023. So he'll always be in the mix. So I have him at number three. Number two, I have Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic, of course, is always hitting those big shots. I think Luka's most known for hitting big shots. I mean, that we don't call him Luka Magic for no reason. So I have him at number two there. And number one, my award winner for Clutch Player of the Year, I have Jalen Brunson. The Knicks, to me, they're not that offensively explosive. And I think the fact that they have a great defensive team, they're going to be in a lot of close games this year. I think they're going to come out winning most of those close games. And that means your best players are going to have to hit clutch shots. And their best player, and who I rely on, is Jalen Brunson. And I think he's absolutely a reliable player to win this award because we've seen him in the past hit big shots. He is a big time player and he is ready for the big time moment. So I have Jalen Brunson as my clutch player of the year. Coach of the year at number three, I have Ime Udoka. I had the Rockets missing the plan. But if the Rockets do somehow make the playoffs, which is very plausible, he will be definitely in the conversation for coach of the year. Number two, I have Tom Thibodeau. I think Thibodeau, if the Knicks get the second seed for the second consecutive year in a row, he will once again be in that conversation for winning coach of the year. But my coach of the year is Jamal Mosley for the Orlando Magic, taking that jump for the fourth consecutive year. If he does this, if he does do better than he did last year, it will be the fourth year in a row in his 4-year tenure that he has gotten better every single year. He has improved the win total for the Magic every single season he has been head coach, which is an incredible feat. And if he does it again, gets the 3 seed, like I said, there should be no doubts for him winning coach of the year because he has really coached this Magic team to be the best defensive team in the league. And if he can improve a little bit on the offensive side, there will be no questions on if he will be the coach of the year. So I have Jamal Mosley as my coach of the year as the Magic improve once again this season. Rookie of the year. Number three, I have Matas Buzelis with the Chicago Bulls. As I mentioned, I think Levine, I think Vucevic are going to get traded at some point. I think Buzelis is going to have an expanded role as the season rolls on. I don't think he'll be in the conversation early, but I think as we get toward the back half of the season, when he gets more of an opportunity to play, even if Levine and Vucevic don't get traded, especially since I don't think the Bulls are going to be that good, I think he's going to surprise some people. He's a very versatile player. He's playing for his hometown team. And I don't think this class is strong. And I think Buzelis got a little bit underrated in this draft. So I think he is going to thrive with a very young team with a potential for a big role to end the season. At number two, I'm going to take Reed Shepherd with the third overall pick. And a lot of people have him as the rookie of the year. And I will tell you why I don't think he's going to win. Look at that Rockets team. Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Amin Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Alperen Sengun. Where is the room for him to really have that significant of a role on his team? Most rookies of the years are usually starters. Reed Shepherd's not going to be a starter, and that's not his fault. I think the Rockets have a very good roster, which is why he's going to be coming off the bench. I think in aspects of the West, the Rockets don't have a great roster, but they just have. But For the rest of the league, compared to the Eastern Conference, I think they have a great roster. But he's not going to be starting. At the end of the day, you're not going to win Rookie of the Year if you're not going to start. I think he's going to put up some amazing numbers off the bench to be in consideration, but to win the actual award, I don't think that's going to happen to someone who's coming off the bench. And my Rookie of the Year is Zach Edey. Zach Edey, the lottery pick for the Memphis Grizzlies, is going to be starting at center the full year for them. I think John Moran is going to help him in his development. The pick and roll action is going to be very hard to guard with John Moran coming downhill at full speed with 7'3" Zach Edey being there as a lob threat. I think Edey's going to thrive. It may be a little bit of an adjustment first, but I think Edey will be in that double-double territory, which is why I think he will win Rookie of the Year in what is not a strong rookie class. We'll start with we'll do Sixth Man of the Year before we do Most Improved Player. Okay, number 3 at Sixth Man of the Year, I have Jaime Jaquez Jr. with the Miami Heat. Had a great rookie season last year, all rookie first team, and he is the sixth man for the Miami Heat, and he will come off the bench and score a lot of points and be productive for them. He is great when attacking the basket, a great driver, someone who has a great inside shot, can draw fouls, get to the line. He is someone who can score the ball consistently, so he will be in the mix there. At number 2, I have Malik Monk. He's really the only player on the bench for the Sacramento Kings, so I expect him to get a lot of minutes. Heavy minutes for someone off the bench. He may play the most out of anyone off the bench this season, so I expect him to continue putting up his offensive stats. Malik Monk is a very explosive player. He can go off any single game, and he probably would have won Sixth Man of the Year last year if it wasn't for him getting injured, so I think he will be in the consideration there, but I don't think he will win. Who I think will win is Dante DiVincenzo with the Timberwolves. Naz Reid won last year, and I think Dante DiVincenzo will win this year. We saw what he did with the Knicks last year. He had a career year. That's not going away. That's just not some coincidence that Dante DiVincenzo essentially becomes arguably a top 2 or top 3 player for that team in the postseason. That's not going away. Obviously, he's coming off the bench because we know the number 2 player in Minnesota. We know the guy who is the number 2 in Minnesota, and that's Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is the starting shooting guard, so Dante has to come off the bench. And Dante is going to continue with his great shooting. He's going to help Minnesota a lot, and I think he was a very underrated aspect in that trade, considering that they had to give up Karl-Anthony Towns. They got some shooting back in Dante DiVincenzo coming off the bench. So I think he is going to be my Sixth Man of the Year. Most Improved Player, number 3, I have Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas, of course, is going to take a much bigger role with the Brooklyn Nets as Mikal Bridges is out. He is in New York. There's not really a star-level player with this Nets roster. So someone's going to have to step up. Someone's going to have to do most of the scoring, and someone who we've seen do some of the scoring before has been Cam Thomas. He is an explosive offensive player, someone who can go off for 40, and we saw that one stretch a couple years ago where he scored 40 in like 3 straight games. So I think this is finally the year where Cam Thomas becomes the consistent number 1 option on offense for the Nets, so he will definitely be in consideration for Most Improved. At number 2, I have Emmanuel Quickley. I said it earlier when talking about the Raptors. This will be his first full year as the starting point guard. He was great off the bench for the Knicks. Now he gets this opportunity to start, and he will only thrive from it under Darko Rajolovic's system. I think Darko's going to set him up in the 2-man action with Barnes. He will be hard to stop, of course, just like his last name says. Very quick, very explosive to the basket, has potentially the opportunity to go out and be an all-star if he does that good. He can score at all 3 levels, so I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be in consideration for this award. But my winner of Most Improved Player is going to be Jalen Johnson, and because someone has to be the second option next to Trae Young. I mean, who else is it going to be? Jalen Johnson, we saw flashes of him improving last year, and he was in the race last year for Most Improved Player. But I think this is the year where he becomes a 20-point-per-game scorer. Maybe if the Hawks surprise people, he could be in consideration for the All-Star game. I think from what I saw in the preseason with him, I think he is going to be very, very improved, and I think he is going to be the runaway winner for this award. So I have Jalen Johnson winning the Most Improved Player. Defensive Player of the Year, number 3, I have Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert, of course, won it last year with the Timberwolves as being the second seed. I don't think he's going to win it again. I highly doubt that. Usually it's pretty hard to win it back-to-back years, but Minnesota's, of course, going to be a top defensive team of the year, so you got to put them in consideration to win Defensive Player of the Year. Number 2, now this may shock you. I have Victor Wembanyama at number 2. And Wemby is the most versatile player in this league. He just has a sense for where the ball is. He can block 5 times a game pretty much on any given night. He is very elite. But the difference between him and number 1 is that number 1 can guard 1 through 5. And number 1 is Bam Adebayo. Bam Adebayo is the only NBA player who can guard consistently 1 through 5. Maybe other than Giannis. I'll give Giannis that. But Bam can guard 1 through 5 any given night. He gets rebounds. He gets blocks. He gets steals. He forces turnovers. He just has that presence on the defensive side where you're just not going to him. Whoever he's guarding, you're just not giving him the ball. It is very hard to score on Bam Adebayo. And I think this will finally be the year where he gets some respect. Wemby will win plenty of Defensive Player of the Year awards. Trust me. He'll probably win it 4 times in his career, maybe even more than that. But I think there will be a year where Bam Adebayo wins it, and I think the fact that Gobert's probably not going to win it in back-to-back seasons, I think this could be the year that Bam Adebayo gets Defensive Player of the Year. And the last award, last but not least, the Most Valuable Player award. At number 3, I have Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic, I mean, he's the Joker. I mean, he's the man. Just the best passing big man we have ever seen. Just impacts the game, scoring-wise, defensive-wise, facilitating-wise. He just really is the core of the Nuggets, and everything revolves around Jokic, and there's no reason why he wouldn't be in this conversation after winning for the 3rd time in 4 seasons. Number 2, I have Luka Doncic. Luka has always been in this conversation. I think with the Mavericks making the finals last year, I think the Mavericks are going to be more looked upon in national media. I think the Mavericks are going to be a more watched and more of a team that people are going to pay attention to after making the finals. So I think Luka will definitely be in more consideration. I don't think he'll have that much of a greater season. I just think the Mavericks will be a team that's going to be more watched and more paid attention to, which is why I think he'll be in consideration. But number 1, the player that's finally going to get it is going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The big man era, the last pretty much 6 MVPs have gone to Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid. I think that trend of the big mans will end with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. If the Thunder get the 1 seed for the 2nd consecutive season, you cannot tell me that the best player on that team should not win MVP unless it's a collective, unless Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren also average 25 points per game. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has lifted that Thunder team from intimacy to the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. And if he does it again, which I think he will, there is no doubt in my mind that he should not win MVP. There is no doubt that he will win MVP if they get the 1 seed. And then that is it for my awards. Again, MVP is Shai. Defensive Player of the Year is Bam. 6th man is Dante DiVincenzo. Most Improved is Jalen Johnson. Rookie of the Year is Zach Edey. Coach of the Year is Jamal Mosley. And Clutch Player of the Year is Jalen Brunson. Now, what you've all been waiting for, the postseason. I give you all my postseason predictions right here, right now on the Take a Shot podcast. And we will start with the play-in round. And we're going to go by my regular season standing predictions that I gave you earlier. The number 10 seed in the Western Conference is the Rockets. They would be playing the number 9 Grizzlies in an elimination. The number 10 seed is the Warriors. Sorry about that. And the number 9 seed is the Grizzlies. This is a rivalry renewed. They will play an elimination game in Memphis. And I'm going to take the Grizzlies in that elimination game to eliminate the Warriors once again in the play-in tournament. In the East, the elimination play-in tournament game is the number 10 Hawks at the number 9 Raptors. And I'm going to take the Toronto Raptors over the Atlanta Hawks, eliminating the Hawks for the 2nd straight year in a row in the first play-in game, just like the Golden State Warriors. Now, the 8-7 play-in game. We'll start with the East this time. the Miami Heat at Indiana Pacers. I'm going to take the Heat in an upset. I think the Heat may just realize, okay, let's not mess around in the play-in tournament this time. Let's get a 7 seed. Let's try to avoid Boston at all costs. So I think Miami will have a little more urgency in a playing game for after what is this, their third year in the play-in tournament in a row? As they say, third time's a charm, winning the first game of the play-in tournament. Let's just say Miami might do that. And then the West, you have the 8 seed Lakers at the 7 seed Kings. I think the Lakers will once again, as an 8 seed, upset the 7 seed, and they will defeat the Sacramento Kings and get the 7 seed in the playoffs. Now, the elimination games. The number 9 seed Raptors at Pacers. I'm going to take the Pacers to beat the Toronto Raptors and get the 8 seed. Again, the Pacers are just better than the Toronto Raptors. And then in the West, the number 9 Grizzlies at the number 7 Kings. And I'm going to take the upset. I think the Grizzlies can come from being the 9 seed, being out of the play, being almost eliminated by the Golden State Warriors, having to win 2 games in the play-in tournament to get the 8 seed. And I think the Grizzlies will get it done. And I think there'll be a lot of questions about the Kings for once again, after being a 3 seed in 2023, losing in the play-in tournament for 2 consecutive years. Now the playoff predictions. We'll start with the West in the first round. The number 8 Grizzlies, because they win the play-in tournament, at the number 1 Thunder. I'll take the Thunder in 5. The 4-5 matchup would be the Nuggets at the Suns. I would take the Nuggets over the Phoenix Suns in 6 games. The number 6 seed, the Pelicans, would play the Mavericks. I would take the Mavericks to sweep the Pelicans. The Lakers at the Timberwolves. I would take the Timberwolves to beat the Lakers in 5 games. In the Eastern Conference, the Pacers and the Celtics, I would have the Celtics in 5 games. The Cavs at the Bucks, I would have the Bucks in 6 games as the number 4 seed. The 6th seed 76ers at the 3 seed Magic, I would take the Sixers in 6 games. And the number 7 Heat at the number 2 Knicks, I would take the Knicks in 7. The Knicks barely get out of that, but they take that. So I have the Celtics, Bucks, 76ers, and Knicks in the second round in the East. And I have the Thunder, Nuggets, Mavs, Wolves in the Western Conference. Same teams as last year in the West, and adding the Bucks and the 76ers instead of the Pacers and the Cavaliers in the East. Now in the second round, we'll start with the Eastern Conference. The number 4 Bucks against the number 1 Celtics. I have the Celtics in 5, beating the Milwaukee Bucks in dominant fashion. Then the number 6 76ers at the number 2 Knicks. The 76ers get their revenge and beat the Knicks in their house in a game 7. The Knicks just run out of juice from the first round, and the 76ers get their revenge. In the West, the number 5 Nuggets at the number 1 Thunder. I have the Nuggets beating the Thunder in 6, just like the Mavericks beat the Thunder in 6 last year. I have the Nuggets beating the Thunder in 6 this year. Then the Mavericks play the Timberwolves, rematch of the Western Conference Finals. But this time, I think the Timberwolves are going to learn from their mistakes of last year. Don't doubt the Mavericks, and I think the Timberwolves will win in a classic 7-game series. So in the conference finals, I have the Celtics and 76ers in the East, and I have the Nuggets and the Timberwolves in the West. In the conference finals, we will start with the Western Conference. I have the 5 seed Nuggets against the 3 seed Timberwolves. I think that the Timberwolves will beat the Nuggets once again. And in 7 games, just like last year. The only difference is Game 7 will be in the Target Center. I think the Nuggets' depth will break down in the postseason, and I think Minnesota just has a deeper team, and I think Anthony Edwards is that dude. That dude. That's all you can do to describe him. And then the 76ers and the Celtics. The 76ers, after not being healthy in the regular season, me putting them as the 6th seed, making the conference finals for the first time in the Joel Embiid era, but they will lose to the Boston Celtics in 6 games. And my NBA Finals prediction will be the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Boston Celtics. And my NBA champion for the 2nd consecutive year is going to be the Boston Celtics. And they will beat the Minnesota Timberwolves just like the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games. Anthony Edwards making his first finals, but Boston, for the first time since 2018, we will have a repeat champion. The Celtics will win in 24, and the Celtics will win in 2025. Thank you so much for watching my prediction video. It was a lot. We've gotten through a lot of content here, and it's a lot to unpack in one single NBA season, but I tried to do it all in one single episode. Thank you so much for watching the podcast. Remember, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, leave a like. It will mean a lot, and follow me on Instagram at take_your_shot_podcast_. That's at take_your_shot_podcast_, and tell me how you would have taken your shots on my takes. That's all my shots for the day. I will see you next Friday to discuss the initial week of the NBA season. Thank you so much, guys.